I'd like to welcome everyone to the council briefing for the 12th of May 2020. We'll declare the meeting open at 6:03 p.m. and start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We do have an apology this evening from Councillor Jonathan Hallett, so just noting that. And I'll just go to the Manager of Governance to see whether we have any contributions for public question time.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we've received a request from Bianca Sandry of Urbanista Town Planning of Perth to speak for 5 minutes on item 5.2, 13 Maple Street in North Perth. So I'll just allow her to speak now.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay?
Bianca, are you able to use your video or?
There's no setting for video, which is bizarre.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll promote Bianca to a panellist and then you should be able to see her video.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Bianca? You're happy to put your camera on?
There we go. Perfect.
Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you and good evening.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors and Officers. As you know, my name is Bianca Sandry from Urbanista Town Planning, speaking in support of the Officer's recommendation for item 5.2, relating to a proposed single house for number 13 Maple Street, North Perth.
Thank you, Bianca. Sorry, just for the record, we do require a suburb in which you reside, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, Perth, which is where the office is. Thank you. So I'll keep this as brief as possible, seeing as the officer's recommendation is for support. But I represent the landowners, Matt and Dominique Seabrook, who are local business owners. Matt's a local real estate agent and will hopefully soon be local residents. They have recently purchased the site, which was subdivided from its parent lot. It is an unusual site as it's an L shape with only a width of 7.9 metres to Maple Street. It has a depth of 32.3 metres and a slope of 4 metres. However, the slope is actually a severe drop, about a quarter into the lot itself. So it's not a slope that declines slowly. There's actually a drop in itself. As such, there are a number of constraints which the design has to accommodate. Maple Street, particularly that between Fitzgerald Street and Knutsford Street, is not intact. In fact, only 5 out of the 19 properties are intact character homes. The remaining 73.6% of properties are either vacant, extensively modified, whereby the character value has been diminished, or are contemporary modern dwellings. In addition to this, 6 of the 19 properties have a frontage of less than 10 metres or 10 metres itself. With number 10 Maple Street currently vacant and probably likely to be subdivided in 2, which will have widths of 10 metres as well. As such, the streetscape is eclectic and does not have any overwhelming prominent features. So in terms of the design, what we've tried to include is some face brick, contrast render, and some dark and cladding materials to provide some depth and articulation. And these are all materials that are seen within the streetscape. The application has undergone a number of modifications to address concerns that have been raised by neighbouring properties, the city's DRP, and also officer comments. The modifications are listed on pages 43 and 44 of your agenda, but just briefly I'll summarise some of the key modifications we've done. So initially we proposed a non-compliant front setback. We've now ensured that that is a compliant front setback, and that reduces the dominance of the garage. The garage itself has been changed to have a permeable gate. We've also looked at other ways of reducing bulk and scale to the adjoining properties by relocating the rear staircase to remove bulk from the side property. We've reduced boundary wall lengths and also increased side setbacks. We've increased openings to the street to provide greater passive surveillance. We redesigned front facade whereby the front entry is more prominent and also providing those different materialities, which I described earlier. We've increased the canopy cover. We've created permeable paving on parts of the driveway to enable root growth, and we've also revised the entry points. We believe we've been quite amenable in all the amendments made to the design, and really they were at the request of the city, the adjoining residents, and the DRP. And we feel that the design is entirely appropriate within its context, and whilst discretion is being sought, it's simply because of the constraints of the site, and we feel that the design that is proposed adequately addresses that and meets the design principles of the ARCOs and the city's built form policy. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Bianca. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. So Bianca Sandri was our only presenter during question time this evening, so we shall move to the CEO for declarations of interest.
Mayor Cole, through you, I've received 3 declarations of interest. The first from Councillor Gondaszewski in relation to item 11.1 regarding the design review panel. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Gondaszewski is friends with one of the applicants for the DRP. Councillor Castle has declared a financial interest in relation to item 7.1, the petition from the Friends of Anzac Cottage. The extent of the interest is that the Friends of Anzac Cottage are ongoing clients of Councillor Castle's business. And Councillor Fotakis has declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 11.1 regarding the design review panel. The extent of the interest being that Councillor Fotakis has served on a City of Vincent advisory group with one of the nominated panel members. They are the 3 declarations of interest we've received in writing, Mayor Cole.
So it's through you, Mayor Cole. There's an additional one from me. It's Councillor Toppelberg here, which is item 8.4, and it's a financial interest in the event the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, well, potentially that my business may be involved with some fit-out works either through the city or through the department. And I had previously declared, I apologise for the late notice, but I'll sort that out in writing for next week, and I will not participate in voting or discussion on the matter.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we do have that declaration from the previous consideration of this item in writing from a meeting several months ago.
Thank you very much, CEO. I just have a question in relation to the practicalities around Zoom and members needing to leave the meeting where there is a financial interest. Can I just get some feedback on that? Do we have the virtual waiting room set up?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might just ask the manager to comment, but our suggestion is that we don't have the virtual room set up, the meeting waiting room at this stage on this closed webinar. What we'd suggest is council members with a direct interest physically leave the meeting, and I will text the councillor to advise when the discussion has been concluded, and they would then rejoin the meeting, essentially similar in practice to what the physical council chamber would be like.
Thank you for that clarification, CEO. Okay, so we have dealt with declarations of interest, so we will go through the items for this evening's council briefing for questions and answers. We can go to the item that was raised during public question time first, in case the applicant's representative is waiting on that item. So that was 5.2, number 13, Mabel Street, North Perth, proposed single dwelling. Councillors, questions? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. It's a question through you to the Director. Sorry, I'm just getting the plans up separately. Just wanted to get some comments on the presentation of the facade. I understand that it's only 7.9 metres wide at Mabel Street, but obviously the decision to put a double garage there, I guess the north-facing aspect appears to have very little in the way of windows or permeability into the property. Can I just get some commentary around why that's proposed to be supported by the city's officers?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll pass to the Manager of Development Design to answer that question.
Through you, Mayor Cole. In response to that question, ultimately it is a narrow site, and the double garage does occupy the majority of the ground floor frontage, so minimal opportunity from that regard to provide openings into living spaces. So ultimately it comes down to the upper floor. If you refer to plans. Yeah, so the upper floor, there is a opening into the dwelling that is balanced with the style of the development as well. They've tried to take on a contemporary design or modern design, so that is balanced with trying to achieve not only an opening to the upper floor, but also providing some opportunity for surveillance, which officers' view, and as supported by the DRP chair, was a reasonable balance to make, and on that basis was supported by the city.
Okay, and in light of recent, so just a further question through to you again, Mr. Naidu. In light of the city's recent, the recent SAT decision with Vincent in relation to the dominance of garages across the frontage, and particularly where there are narrow lots, whilst I understand the contextual difference, the location, and I understand the proposed visual permeability of the garage itself, was there any consideration given to either, and I understand the nature of the site as well, but was there any consideration given, my understanding is that it could accommodate a tandem bay in order to be able to accommodate 2 vehicles, or the city insisting on only 1 garage, or perhaps opportunities to have a different treatment of the garage doors or frontage so that it didn't look like a single continuous double garage across effectively the whole lot? Were those considered, and what was the applicant's response, and how we arrived at the design outcome? I can see the difference between the superseded plans, but just curious as to what processes we've gone through.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, that was absolutely raised. It was also raised in the DRP chair comments, if you refer to that section in the report. But ultimately, the double garage was proposed on the basis that there is also a significant slope and retaining wall that exists. So it was intended to accommodate a double garage configuration rather than a tandem configuration, on the basis that the depth required for a tandem bay configuration, 10, 11 odd metres into the lot, would require significant works as well. So the double garage was proposed on that basis. It also was developed through the scheme, as you will see through the plans as well, primarily in relation to how it presents to the street with the permeable garage doors. Now, you refer to another SAT matter that absolutely formed part of this administration's key learnings, and on that basis we included a section in the report around the streetscape and character, as well as a streetscape analysis around dwellings along this portion of Maple Street and the existence of double garages and other forms of car parking. So all of that on balance, considered against Clause 67 relevant matters to be considered, was considered to be an appropriate outcome. So all of that absolutely was included as part of the city's assessment.
Councillors, I might just ask the Manager of Governance just to put up page 91. Which is a picture of the front elevation. Thank you. Councillors, questions? Questions on this item? Just in terms of the elevation that we see here, Manager, that appears to be 2 major openings in the upper story, which is different to what was proposed in the superseded plans. Is this dark tinting, or is that intended to be visual openings that have some interaction with the street. So just wanted to note, can someone note that the question's been received and will be answered?
Sorry, through you, Mayor Cole. Sorry, apologies.
You're working on it? That's okay. As long as
I am working on it.
you heard me.
Apologies. Ultimately, the intention is to provide that surveillance, although from the images, it does appear that it is heavily glazed. That is something that we can clarify through the briefing notes, but ultimately the intention is to provide that level of surveillance as well.
I think it would be good to clarify that, whether that's opaque or a really dark tint, or whether that's actually glass where you can actually have an interaction between the building and the street, not just for surveillance from inside looking out, but what that will appear like for the person walking past that building.
Sure, that can be clarified through the briefing notes.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had similar questions to Councillor Toppelberg and they've been responded to. So council members, are there any further questions on this item before I move on? No? Okay. So we'll go back to the beginning of the agenda and work through sequentially. So that we'll go back to 5.1, amendment number 6 to local planning scheme number 2, and amendment number 1 to local planning policy number 7.4.5, temporary accommodation. Councillors? I'll ask a very quick question on what I thought was a very thorough report. Just in relation to this issue that we have talked about in the past, where you may have a homeowner who wants to go on a holiday, say something that we can all dream about for now, but an international holiday, and sometimes people consider part funding that holiday through renting out their house as a short-term option. I had considered that, noting that that would bring many headaches with it, in that it would not be a simple process. But if someone wanted to do that, I thought that if they appointed someone to live in their house as a host during that time that wasn't the owner, would that be acceptable if they met all of the other criteria?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's a very good question. And it is quite a complicated answer. So I might go through that in detail in the briefing notes and set out the different scenarios, because there are a number of different scenarios, and some of which would be appropriate without approval, some of which would need to be approved under one of those different land uses that are set out. So I'll set that out, but it's a very good question, and it's what a lot of people want to do, and we're going to have to be very clear if this is the position that is ultimately adopted for practically for people when they want to take up short-term accommodation in that form. They go away on holidays and someone comes and lives in their house. We just need to be very clear on our website and in our information we provide to the residents what does need approval and what doesn't. In a lot of cases, no approval will be needed at all.
So just from reading the report, it appears that if you are going to qualify for not requiring development approval, there is going to be a requirement of a host, and there's no option not to have a host. So I guess it's just, like, I can understand the logistical issues, but was there any contemplation of looking at whether a homeowner could use their home for short stay on a, say, 1 month basis out of every 12 months without a host present? Or, you know, I can understand that would then lead to the sorts of issues around management, etc. But I guess I'm just seeking on that.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, we did look at that issue. There were no recommendations that came out of the parliamentary inquiry in that space, and so there was very little guidance around what time period would be appropriate and what wouldn't be. And so on that basis, we've proceeded with these land uses, and we will need to, and there are certain things that would simply be exempt because they don't occur for an adequate period of time. So I might, I'll put some more information together around that, and it might be that we can consider, you know, whether those short periods are simply exempt through the policy, or through another mechanism.
Thank you for that consideration. I just think it's worth having that discussion now, given that we're dealing with this item. Council members, any questions? Okay, no indication there. All right, we'll move on.
Through you, Mayor Cole.
Sorry,
I think
I have my hand up.
Oh, apologies, I didn't say. It does disappear into the green background sometimes. Thank you. Go ahead, Susan, Councillor Godchefsky.
Thank you very much. I just had some questions in relation to section 2 of the proposed local planning policy around, let me have a look, exemption from development approval. Can I just get some further understanding in relation to how this notification is provided, and then that needs to be according to the city's satisfaction? So how a person that was providing a notification would know that what they were providing was to the city's satisfaction, and whether or not that would be considered some form of approval?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that is a very good question. The management plan would need to meet the requirements set out in the policy, and that's the intent of those words, of that wording. I agree that it's something that needs to be given further consideration. So we will do that between now and next week. Perhaps the words to the city's satisfaction, because that would essentially, as you say, create an approval process, aren't appropriate. It's just a matter of requiring that the management plan and code of conduct addresses all of the requirements set out in the policy. So it's probably that simple. That's the intent of that provision in any case, and that wording.
Okay, that clarifies things for me on that one. And I also just wanted to put it out there to flag a potential amendment to that section in relation to the unhosted holiday house, holiday accommodation in local centre, district centre, regional centre or commercial zone. Just to, I can send through the words, but just to have it on the table for discussion next week in relation to removing the ability to have no host without development approval. And then the third thing was in relation to this section, how does compliance work in these sort of circumstances where an application, the short-term accommodation does not require development approval, but is not operated in accordance with the management plan? How does that work? Is it just like any other compliance mechanism, or how does the city enforce that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. We will need to investigate that wording again in that context, because it's a good point that you raise. Would the development be exempt if the development wasn't carried out in accordance with the management plan? The current wording, that might not be the case. So we'll need to review that this week to ensure that is the case. Because I think it's as simple as saying that development needs to operate in accordance with the management plan and code of conduct that's been provided. And if that's the case, then it's as simple as enforcing a condition of approval, basically. If there's a complaint, the city would be able to follow up, gather evidence that the development is not occurring in accordance with the management plan, or the code of conduct hasn't been provided to the residents. And if that's the case, then the city could take enforcement action and the development would be exempt. And so it would just be as if a development had been carried out without approval.
Okay, yep. I think that's fine. Yeah, so again, potentially an amendment to add an additional clause in there around section D about operation. Yeah, I think that's all I had on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gondaszewski. Any further questions? No? Okay. Next item is under Infrastructure and Environment, 6.1 tender 56 of 2020, hire of skid steer loader for horticultural operations, appointment of successful tenderer. Any questions? Dan Loden, you're smiling. No? No? Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you. Just to clarify in terms of the amount over the period of time, I appreciate I'm not, angling for large-scale asset purchase at this time, but just the consideration in relation to the hire as opposed to purchase option. If I've missed that in the report, my apologies.
Yes, through you, Nicole. So this is a service that we already have. So, we currently operate this way. You can see that we don't just get the equipment, but we get the driver as well. So there's, if you looked at the cost, it would be, in comparison, it would be, the material, the driver and the equipment. So it has been judged that this is the most cost-effective way to do it.
Has that judgment been done through a high-level review of the market, or has that judgment been done through just, I guess, the continuation of an ongoing program of work?
Yeah, so through you, Nicole, I think the answer is both those ways, through a high-level review and also looking at the way the service currently operates.
That's great. So in the briefing notes, could we get some information on the what it is estimated over a similar 3-year time frame, just to get some confirmation that it isn't in fact cheaper to have a staff member and a truck that we own and then sell, or something like that. What are other sort of procurement options that might be in place, so that we know that the business case stacks up for a procurement of this value, given that it's over a high value over a number of years?
Yeah, through you, Nicole, we'll add some information to the briefing notes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Councillor Gondaszewski, I was keen to ask that question too, so thanks for providing that information, Director, in the briefing notes. Any further questions on this item? No? Okay. Next item is currently, we don't have a report on this, but I'll still go to it in case there are any questions. It's 6.2, outcome of public consultation for the Scarborough Beach Road Main Green Brady intersection. And just noting that this isn't late item because we are keeping the advertising open until the 15th of May in order to allow community the opportunity to comment for as long as possible at short notice from Main Roads, and that report will come forward to the 19th of May. There isn't a report, but I will just check if there are any questions from council members. Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Just a quick one. How confident are we that, or how did we deliver our consultation to the resident? Was it done by hand? Did we post? How confident are we that the people who need to know have been informed, so that any feedback we get, we can be comfortable that those that wanted to provide it were given an opportunity?
Yes, through you, Nicole. So what we've done is it's done through the EHQ website. So you go online and put your views there. So we've widely advertised it through the website, social media, etc. But the other thing we did was we hand-delivered letters or postcards to the 3 streets that were most affected based on the workshop discussion. So they've got direct information that there is a survey.
And do we know the proportion of owners to occupiers? I guess just if someone's an owner, doesn't live locally or otherwise, are we comfortable that they would have been informed? Did we try and contact the ratepayer for each of the properties in those streets?
Sorry, I should clarify. We wrote to the owners, so the absent owners we wrote to from the rates information that we had.
Great job, thank you, Director. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll move on. Next item is 6.3, which is tender number 568 of 19, hire of trucks and miscellaneous plant. Is that miscellaneous plant? Miscellaneous plan, I assume.
Yeah, I noticed that typo earlier, so I'll blame governance for that one.
Yeah, okay, okay. Appointment of successful tenderer. Just to clarify, this is a late item. We had at one stage been advised it was withdrawn, but I understand it's a late item. There's not a report, but I'll still open it up for any questions if there is any questions about this. Okay, feel free to put any questions forward when the report comes out. When can we expect to see that, Director?
That's really my call. So they are working on it now. Just need more work to get to this, obviously to this meeting, but later on this week when the council agenda gets published, it'll be ready then.
Okay, so probably Friday by the sounds of it. Okay, thank you. All right. Next item is 7.1, petition Friends of Anzac Cottage, and we do have Councillor Castle with a financial interest.
Yes, I'll be leaving and be back soon.
Well, we will see you soon. Thank you. Okay. So this is item 7.1 as mentioned, and just to flag that administration has indicated that they will be withdrawing this item after the briefing. So this will then be returning to us at the June meeting. But I will open it up for questions. Councillor Gondaszewski, I can see your hand this time.
Thank you. I've got to get better at that. Just in relation to the potential withdrawal of this item, recognising it is at the discretion of administration as to what comes forward, just if we get some clarity on the reason that the item is considered to be incomplete at this point in time.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we were approached by the petitioners, the Friends of Anzac Cottage, and they just asked if we could provide them with some additional time to consult their members after we had prepared the administration's report, and they would like to get the input from their members so that they can provide a response, and we were supportive of doing that to allow them to feel that they had had adequate opportunity to explain how they felt about the situation, and also to feel that they could put their view forward, if you like.
Okay, I do appreciate the, we do always open to additional consultation within Vincent. I guess my question in relation to that though, is it considered that there is likely to be any material changes to the recommendation? It seemed to be fairly cut and dry.
Look, from my perspective on looking at the situation, I would be surprised if we vary the recommendation materially. But at the same time, we value the Friends of Anzac Cottage and everything they're doing. So I would really like to provide them with as much opportunity to provide their point of view. And it could well be that there is something that they can share with us that you know, assists us to see the situation differently. But it is a little bit of a difficult one. As the paper points out, we've got some pretty clear legal constraints on the city, regardless of how we would like to respond on this occasion.
Thank you, Executive Director. Nothing further from me.
Councillors, any questions? I just thought that in terms of this coming forward next month, I know that it's more about the actual legalities of the situation, but I thought it probably wouldn't help to maybe have a little bit more elaboration about the community engagement work that the Friends have done over the past, say, 6 years, and what the Vietnam veterans have planned in terms of community engagement going forward. That would be a useful addition. I know that it is mentioned there, but perhaps just a bit of an elaboration. And just if we bring this back to the next meeting, just confirming that both parties are aware that this report will come forward to that meeting.
Yes, Mayor Cole, I will certainly make sure that both parties have had adequate time, and I'll take those comments on board in terms of expanding. Both groups have, as you know, are involved in community engagement, so we'll make sure that that's very clearly articulated. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there any further comments or, sorry, not comments, questions before we move on? Okay. Next item is 7.2, National Redress Scheme, participation of WA local governments, key decisions and actions. Any questions on this item? No? Okay. 7.3, investment report as at the 30th of March 2020. Noting that our that you can see a significant drop in interest rates for the city, and that these reports, these financial reports for us this evening, are really starting to see the full impact of COVID-19. And any questions in relation to this? Okay. Next item, 7.4, financial statements as at the 31st of March 2020. Any questions?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I was just wondering if Councillor Castle has rejoined the briefing yet. Could we
My
give her a moment?
apologies. Thought she was being invited back.
Through Mayor Cole, Councillor Castle's just logging back in.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Castle, welcome back. We did speed ahead a little there, so I just wanted to check in with you whether you had any questions in relation to item 7.2, which is our participation in the National Redress Scheme for institutional child sexual abuse, or in relation to 7.3, which is the investment report. No, okay, thank you. All right, so we are now at item 7.4, financial statements as at 31st of March 2020. Any questions? I just had a question in relation to the underspend in expenditure by program, and looking at Beatty Park Leisure Centre works was one of the areas of underspend, but I just wanted to ask whether there'll be some catch up in next month's financial statements, given that there has been quite a lot of maintenance work being undertaken currently now and just in the last few weeks.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I suspect that's the case, but I'll confirm that for you in the briefing notes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just assuming that we're going to see a larger impact still in next financial statements than we have for April, going into April.
Yes, you're correct, Mayor Cole. You'll certainly start to see the impact of the COVID-19 on our financial statements start to flow through from this point forward.
Yeah, okay, definitely seeing that, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, we'll move on to item 7.5, authorisation of expenditure for March to 1st of March to 31st of March 2020. Any questions? And 7.6, May budget review 1920, and in brackets COVID-19. This was a late item. Hopefully council members have had a chance to read. If not, feel free to put some questions through during the week. But are there any questions on this item? Okay, look, I did have a question. It was just really in relation to deferral of some of the retained projects. that are, oh no, sorry, not retained, that's all straightforward. The carry forwards. So I just wanted to clarify, because in the table on page 5, it talks about deferral year, and there are a number of projects that are being deferred till 2021, and some that state unknown at this stage, but the total amount is about $1.2 million. And then on page 6, it talks about the transfer of the $1.2 million into the Asset Sustainability Reserve for projects that have been earmarked to be carried forward in subsequent financial years. I just wanted to flag whether all of those projects could be undertaken in 2021 rather than having funds moved into reserve and not to be expended next financial year, because I think there's, well, that's my question. And whether there's capacity to deliver those deferred works next financial year, particularly in light of the fact that we are seeing changes to restrictions. With that, you know, with the effect of wanting to continue work and to continue stimulus and to not delay unless we have to.
Yeah, through you. Yeah. And
I was going to say,
please.
sorry, if I answer the capacity question, certainly
Please do.
We could deliver the, you know, we have the capacity to deliver those projects. That's not the issue. I think the issue for infrastructure is whether the funds are available. And obviously next year's budget is still being worked upon. And if you look at bringing forward substantial works for Beatty Park, which is proposed for next year, which would have been the year after, and it's all about really how much money is left over to deliver these projects when we get to the final budget. I think that's the limitation.
Thank you. Director of Community and Business, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Mayor Cole, I think that really captures it. It's really going to come down to our affordability, and we've certainly got a desire to do a lot of things. It's going to be about how much we can afford to do. So I expect we'll be able to give our ratepayers more advice on that in the as the budget comes to hand.
So I'm then therefore assuming that in the 2021 budget we'll see full allocation of that 1.2 million that's been moved into the Asset Sustainability Reserve from this financial year.
We'll certainly take that on board, and we'll consider that during the budget setting process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, council members? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to say that for the finance team and for our Executive Director of Community and Business, you know, you have a budget in place and you have to completely go through and rework a whole fourth quarter whilst completely redeveloping the 2021 budget and the long-term financial plan. It's a huge body of work and has been incredibly consuming right now. So thank you so much. Yes, to all of the team involved in that. Moving on to the next item, that concludes Community and Business Services for the evening. So moving on to Chief Executive Officer items now, and the first item is 8.1, variation of Local Government House Trust. Any questions? No questions, okay. 8.2, nomination of elected members for the vacant local government position on the Central Perth Land Redevelopment Committee. Just like to say thank you very much to the Director of Strategy and Development for the additional information that you sent through to council members today. That was very useful. Are there any questions in relation to this item? Councillor Gondaszewski.
No question, just to say I'm happy to add my name to the other councillors that have put their names forward for this position.
Thank you, Councillor Gondaszewski. That's 3 council members. We do have 3 EOIs. If anyone else wishes to express an interest, is still very welcome to. Feel free to email, etc. Any other questions on this? Okay, we'll move on. Next item is 8.3, grant of access easement over the city's right-of-way, lot 303, for the benefit of lot 49, number 33, Scarborough Beach Road, North Perth, and acquisition of lots 303 and 304 on deposited plan 2 28,000 as Crown land. Any questions? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Just
Wallace, did you have your hand up, Councillor Wallace? Go to you next.
Yeah, I think Josh was first.
Yeah, and then you.
just questions. Is Jay still there? Is Mr. Naidu still?
Yes, he's still there.
Still there. Just
He's appearing as John Corbalini too, but no, Jay Naidu.
That's all right. Just the is it the development proposal at 33 Scarborough Beach Road? There was a question about the approval and the relationship to this. Can we just get an update of where that proposal is at, please?
Sure, through you, Mayor Cole. There is a development application live for that site. It proposes 6 group dwellings. Administration has delegation to deal with that application as it's currently proposed. So there are still some outstanding DA-related matters around the design and such. So we're still working with the applicant in relation to that. Separate to that, there is still consideration of getting legal rights of access. So ultimately, this easement would enable that that legal rights of access to facilitate that development.
Just for clarity, my understanding from the conversation we had late last week is that the city was seeking advice as to whether is it possible for that approval to be granted without the legal right of access having been granted. Is it possible to grant an approval for that site subject to the settlement of this easement matter, because the site currently has no access?
Through Mayor Cole, correct. The site currently has no legal rights of access from the rear, and Scarborough Beach Road proves to be challenging with the bicycle infrastructure as well. So on that basis, we have posed that question and we are getting advice. That is to be confirmed, but as soon as that is received, we'll be liaising with the applicant. And if it's possible to issue the development approval subject to a condition requiring that easement arrangement to be confirmed, then administration will be pursuing that.
Sorry, this last one, and the advice goes to the principal, not obviously site specific. So the principle of whether it is possible to provide a planning approval subject to the granting of an easement. That's the question that's been asked, not specific to this site. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Cole, that is the principle that's being considered. Yeah.
Councillor Wallace, you had a question?
Yeah, through you, Michael. I just had a quick question to the administration about if we do grant the easement, does that cause any issues for the Minister of Land when he acquires the land as Crown land? Like, does he require consent of the lots that the easement is in favour of?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'd include in the easement that it would be extinguished when the land was acquired by the Crown and then vested in the city as a public right of way. So granting the easement won't impact that process.
Council members, any further questions on this one? Okay, well, we'll move on to item 8.4, lease of 246 Vincent Street, Leederville, to the Minister for Works, Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, amendment to incentive condition. It's back. Any questions? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, my question was just around, this was similar to what I asked her last time around. Are we better off or worse off paying the extra $25,000 because of delaying that cost for us in the future on a discounted basis? Last time I think I tried to work out what the discount rate was, but I didn't quite get the number that the city had. So I was just curious if we looked at that at all.
Sorry, just before I go to that, I'm just noticing this is a issue. This one, Councillor Toppelberg does have a financial interest, but I note do we need to request that Councillor Toppelberg leave the meeting entirely. It looks
Through
like
you, Mayor Cole. Yes. Yeah, apologies for not picking that up. If Councillor Toppelberg can leave the meeting and rejoin, and the CEO will contact him once this discussion on the item's completed.
I'm just not sure if he's stepped away because he's not responding to what I'm saying. Is there any way that you can exit him?
Through you, Mayor Cole, just for Maluka's benefit, when she exited me earlier, I wasn't able to rejoin. So I'm sure it's possible for him to be exited, but rejoining will be a challenge.
Okay, I see
I think
he has
Josh has
left the
exited
meeting.
now.
He's exited, and we hope he'll get the safe passage back. Okay. So who was asking a question? Councillor Loden, back to you. Apologies.
I think I finished my question.
Through you, Mayor Cole, and in response to Councillor Loden's question, I haven't recalculated the difference in postponing the payment of the $25,000, but I can work with the finance team to provide some calculations on that. I just wanted to clarify that this amendment came about because previously we were under the impression through our negotiations with the Department of Works that the $25,000 was included in that 40% incentive. So that has changed, or we're at the process of being ready to sign the variation and extension of lease, and now understand that that needed to be in addition to the 40% incentive. So that will come out of the rent we receive over the total 10-year term, and the proposal is that it's paid in the first year to take into account the fact that we're delaying the payment of that 1.6 million over 3 years.
Sorry, before I go to Councillor Smith, Councillor Loden, are you asking a supplementary question to what you in the same line? Yep, go ahead, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Smith.
So just to make sure I've got that clear, it's basically saying we're paying an extra 25,000. That's the cost for us to enable us to defer that payment over 3 years rather than over the original 2 years. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's the reason the Department of Works has requested the additional 25,000. So it just comes out of the rent that we would receive over the 10-year.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Cole. I'm just wondering why we would be charged a fee of 25,000 to do the split that we've done. Why have they come back with that? I can't grasp it.
Through you, Mayor Cole, it's not really a fee. It's basically in order to reach agreement on the apportionment of the incentive payment, which is so the portion of the incentive that's to be paid up front as a cash payment. The agreement for it to be paid over 3 years, as opposed to the original proposal by the Department of Works, was on the basis that we provide further funds to take into account the fact that they're not receiving it all upfront. So they calculated 25,000 as the amount necessary to compensate for the fact that the 1.6 million or 1.625 million is paid over 3 years. So it's their calculation of what's reasonable. It's not really a fee. And our view is that it doesn't change. It just means we're receiving 25,000 less of the total rent over the 10-year term.
And thank you. And is there any legalities with us declining to pay that 25,000?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it's a condition of the lease extension and variation proposal. So their proposal to us is if we don't accept this, they won't enter into the new 10-year lease with a 5-year option term, which has been proposed, and the rent that's proposed. This is one of the key terms that we need to agree on in order to enter into this new extended lease.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Look, I just was considering that this rent incentive is not going towards a fit out, and that You know, I just want to just be absolutely clear that the city has done everything it can to negotiate the best possible outcome, because we've seen this 3 times now, and each time the city is paying a little bit extra. Is this absolutely necessary? You know, like, can we, if we did say fair's fair, it's a great deal, and you're not using this money to do a fit out, what are the implications of us saying this is just a bridge too far?
Through you, Mayor Cole, perhaps the CEO can answer that, as he met with a member of Department of Works in respect to this earlier this year, which is when we agreed to this. The reason this has had to come back to council, it seems there was a miscommunication in what was agreed at that meeting. So their position is they did always agree that it was an additional 25,000 on top of the 40% incentive. Unfortunately, our position was different, and that was communicated to them. But we've now come to the stage of signing the variation extension of lease, and it's based on the 25,000 being in addition to the 40%, which is why we need to come back to council. But perhaps the CEO can explain what was agreed at the meeting and why we agreed to an additional 25,000.
Through you, Mayor Cole, when I met with the Department of Finance, we didn't discuss figures or sums. I did say that we would consider some recognition of the time value for money for splitting the incentive payment over 3 years. We've been negotiating this now for close to 12 months. It's our major rental income and our major commercial asset, and we are essentially down to the wording on this last $25,000 payment, and in totality, the proposal is for $6.6 million of rent over 10 years, but we have got down to this last point on the wording of that incentive payment, which it's definitely been suboptimal in terms of the communication with the commercial consultant that the department has engaged, and that communication hasn't been clear or consistent on a number of these points, including the aspect that you referenced in terms of whether or not we negotiated on this incentive-based structure or just an overall reduction in the rent, and whether or not that incentive was going to be used for a fit-out, which it's not.
Thank you, CEO. So when the terms were put to the negotiator for the department, at the time that was put to council, was that cross-checked with the Department of Works or their negotiator before that actually came to council for resolution?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we provided the proposed wording and a copy of the council agenda well before the meeting, and yes, they did confirm that it appeared to meet the department's proposal, but unfortunately they've since confirmed that no, the Department of Works cannot accept what council approved earlier this year, and the 25,000 needed to be in addition to the 40%.
Pretty harsh. Okay, I'll reserve my comments till next week. Any further comments or, sorry, questions? Okay, moving on, thank you. Item 8.5, update on the city's advisory group seeking nominations for community representatives.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm just going to contact Councillor Toppelberg to rejoin me.
Okay, well, I'll wait for Councillor Toppelberg to rejoin, so hold your questions on this item.
Councillor Toppelberg says he's unable to rejoin because he got booted off.
Through you, Mayor Cole. David, did you ask him to connect the general meeting login? Because if he does that, he'll come up as an attendee, I understand, and then I'll just promote him to as a panelist.
I think we might need to perfect what the process is for the council meeting next week. So having a few technical issues with people coming and going, and whether council members do actually have to leave, technologically leave the meeting, or whether they can simply mute the mic and not appear on screen, given that the meeting is streamed and that they would be able to view the meeting through the live stream with all community members and members of the public regardless. Perhaps that could be considered for next week's meeting.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we'll consider that. We are just testing at the moment, John, the Executive Director, Strategy and Development. We've put him on hold and he can't see or hear anything, so we will be able to do that in future. But apologies, I wasn't aware of this until just now.
I understand it's a work in progress, the Zoom, and I think you're doing a really great job. It's just whether we actually do need people to be absented, given that they can, ordinarily view the live stream anyway.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I've just added Councillor Toppelberg back as a panelist, so he should be here.
Maluka, he said he's just been kicked out again.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just while we're waiting for Councillor Toppelberg, just to comment on the advice from the Minister encouraging Council to reconsider face-to-face meetings, and we'll undertake some review of the Council chamber and the square meterage and provide advice back to Council on the manner in which we could safely reintroduce face-to-face meetings.
I'm interested about how that would involve members of the public for public question time if we're dealing with 20 people, because between the staff and council we'd be getting close. So how would we accommodate public question time?
Through Mayor Cole, I think, just as we're waiting for Councillor Toppelberg, for instance, we could potentially set up the public gallery in a different room or in the function room, have sectioned off areas, and whether or not that could be done electronically. With
one person could come into the room at a time, and you had a waiting area that was separate. But I think when you have a maximum, it doesn't come down to having separate entrances for people. So that anyway, very, very much welcome the advice when it comes.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just based on the discussions at Beatty Park and the library, I think if we can create a smooth path into and out of the room so that we don't have people queuing, that's probably the key thing. But I'm sure with the layout, we can find a way to do that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, Councillor Toppelberg does seem to be back.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the journey. We were just coming up to 8.5, which is the update on the city's advisory group seeking nominations for community representatives. So just taking questions now. Councillor Gondaszewski.
Just a question in relation to item 5. I have a feeling that the Safer Vincent Crime Prevention Partnership's name was changed to the Safer Vincent Advisory Group in an iteration of the terms of reference at some point. Just wondering if that could be checked and if required updated between now and next week.
Through you, Mayor Cole, apologies. That's correct, and I've updated it for the council agenda. That was unfortunately still on our website, but we've updated all references to that now.
Okay, thank you. That's
Councillors, that's nothing further. Councillors, any questions on the advisory groups? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Cole. Just on item 6, how we're meeting fortnightly with town teams. It says here that we're meeting with local business owners. So I'm just a little bit, you know, we're not all of the town team members that are meeting with us are business owners. So I'm just wondering, do we need to change the wording on that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can update the language on that to be more specific, that the regular meetings are with the chairs or senior office holders of the town teams as the engagement tool for small business owners, but we can update the wording in the report to reflect that.
Thank you.
Council members, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I just have a question in relation to 3.3, or particularly in consolidating the EAG and the Urban Mobility Advisory Group. We're proposing to have up to 10 community representatives. Can you remind me how many representatives were on each of those groups when they were separate? Someone?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think Councillor Loden could best answer that question for us right now.
I can advise on the EAG. We had 10 members on that group.
And my recollection is there were quite a few community members on the UMAG. So I guess my question is around how we're going to manage nominations for this new merged group, and will we try to ensure there's a bit of equal representation from the two areas of focus?
Through you, Mayor Cole. Oh.
Through Mayor Cole, yes, we can address that through the language in the EOI, requesting people with or nominations from community members with experience and expertise in active transport planning and transport planning and road safety issues.
And is there, have you given any thought to how you're going to manage what might sometimes be disparate areas of focus? Because there may be some crossover with those two groups, but there's also a number of items that might have come to the advisory groups that don't really affect the other. So how is that going to be managed?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think the alignment is very strong with under the priorities that Council set through the strategic community plan in terms of connected community, promotion of active transport and sustainability. We would think that any areas of misalignment would be in the minority and manageable. Mm-hmm. Through you, Mayor Cole, that one suggestion from Councillor Hallett, who's not here, who I've spoken about on this issue, is that if there was a particular area of focus or project that needed a sustained period of engagement on the transport or the transport planning side of things, that we could essentially establish a small working group of the experts from this combined group to work on those issues, including, for instance, review of the development and implementation of the integrated transport plan.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a further question to that? Through you, Mayor Cole. Am I the only one that can hear me?
No, I can hear you. I was giving you the thumbs up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see you.
Go on ahead, as they say in
I'm now calling
Ireland.
from my phone because my iPad's been banned by Maluka, so I'm only able to call from my phone.
Right. You got the green light.
Thank you. So it just further to Councillor Castle's question, the genesis of why those groups were dissolved or combined, is that not irrelevant, because anyone who nominates will be nominating with a broad interest in all of the matters that may become before a group that looks at transport and environmental issues that impact the City of Vincent? Would it not just be a new call for nominations and not have a direct relationship to the previous boss? The expertise might be have a bent one way or the other, that the requirement will be to have a broad interest in all those issues?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, the expression of interest and the new terms of reference to be considered by the group would be drawn directly from council's directions underneath its priorities in the strategic community plan. So it would essentially be a new group covering sustainability and transport.
Councillors, any other questions? Look, I have a question just in relation to clause 6 and the, talking about meeting fortnightly with the town teams that will be replaced with town teams during the COVID-19 response. I'm just wondering about whether that binds the council to continuing to hold these fortnightly meetings for COVID, because I think there is a really strong role for economic rebound and recovery, and there has been some discussion about whether this would become an economic recovery roundtable. Hasn't been fleshed out, something that we can talk to the group about tomorrow. But I think that we do need a motion that does leave that that able to sort of grow and develop. So I note that this is talking about this fortnightly, it's quite prescriptive, and I think that that group will probably come to a point where it has a sort of a new name and a economic rebound focus, and is something that will replace the bag, but not be the same, the format. But I'm just querying whether clause 6 is a bit prescriptive to allow that to happen.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's a very good point, and we could essentially take it as given that we would come back with, as these meetings develop, we would come back with further advice either through the weekly meetings with the COVID committee, or when council considers the appointment of community members to the other advisory groups, further advice on how council would like to formalise that economic engagement or that economic rebound through a roundtable or some form of citywide business grouping, noting that the City of Vincent doesn't have its own business chamber.
Or perhaps there could be some additional commentary in the report around that, just because we don't sort of want the motion to read that the bag is gone and that we're having fortnightly meetings. But I think that there is really an objective to do something quite substantial in that space, and perhaps that hasn't quite been captured.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'll update the report to be more explicit in that direction.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. You totally, I forgot that question, so thank you very much for bringing that up, because that was on my list as well. And also I was just wondering, are we able to, is this a group then that we can, when we're looking at things as the integrated transport plan and other plans, that we can then refer to this team as well, considering that they are all in our major town centres, and where we could, from time to time, bring the group together, that we can then have engagement with them on these, on information, important information that other than just the other groups themselves. Is that an option that we could do that? I hope I've made sense then.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I agree with Councillor Smith. If we provide some further advice to council on what this business engagement mechanism could be and how that links directly to the town teams, we could have some more formality around that and the manner in which we provide references for advice or input on a variety of the plans and strategies which impact on businesses, including around things like car parking or further issues around the way we're promoting businesses throughout the city.
Thank you, CEO. Do you have something else to add?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, and probably just to also, if I could, re-emphasise the importance in the previous meeting of the COVID committee, that aspect and the strong encouragement from the Premier and the Minister for Local Government that we work with our businesses on al fresco dining and other options to help the easing restrictions from Monday, and that'll be particularly important through this group and having that communication and essentially asking town teams and businesses to make suggestions back to us and vice versa on how we can maximise the safe operation of our businesses within phase 2.
Yep, already being discussed at the meeting, so I'm sure there'll be much more discussion on that tomorrow. So yes, very much that's the sort of critical stuff that we're dealing with right now, and it's great to have the town teams involved in that discussion. Thank you very much, CEO. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is 8.6, report and minutes of the Audit Committee meeting of the 5th of May 2020. Any questions? No. Okay, the next item is 8.7, information bulletin. Councillor Toppelberg and then Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. And maybe it might be something that's provided through the briefing notes, maybe perhaps from yourself, but just confirming, because there's no detail as we only received the minutes, the Tamala Park, first question to you, Mayor Cole, the Tamala Park Regional Council meeting minutes indicate that the manager, I think is under the management agreement, that the company that is responsible for that made the position of the development manager redundant. Am I to read correctly from the minutes that that was without informing the owners of the development, which is the 7 councils?
Yes, you are, and that was raised as by many council members as being acceptable.
And so what's the recourse? Because the council decision was to advise them of the deep concern. What's the recourse or the path forward? And is there been clarity in terms of those roles such that we understand going forward who's responsible for those, or whether the owners of the property actually have any decision-making control in that matter?
Well, my understanding is that the message was back to the project manager that was not acceptable and that we do expect the roles to be fulfilled. So I expect an update at the next meeting and I can bring that information back to the council.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, we're going to Councillor Loden next. Councillor Loden.
Sorry, I was having issues with my iPad there for a sec. Just around the development application stats, I've noticed that there's actually seems to be an increase in development applications receiving over the last couple of months, rather where I would have expected it to be a decrease. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that is correct. We have had an increase in the number of development applications and building permit applications and inquiries or complaints and compliance matters since the state of emergency was announced. The most recent figures from last week and the week before were back to normal. So the numbers were again aligned with what we would expect at this time of year and the same as what we had last year. But for the month of for the end of March and the month of April, the numbers were up.
Anything further, Councillor Logan? No. Anything further on the info bulletin? No. Okay. So we have one confidential item remaining. I'm just going to ask, before we go into confidential session, are there any questions on this item? There doesn't look like there's any questions, so unless I get an indication of a question, we don't need to go into confidential for this item. Okay, so there's no questions on item 11.1, which is the confidential item, minor amendment of design review panel terms of reference and appointment of design review panel. Okay, all right, well, there being no questions on the confidential item, that means that we can conclude the meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, and thank you to anyone joining us to watch the meeting. And we can bring the meeting to an end at 7:24 p.m. Thanks, everyone.